Morning, we're looking at some of the big stories making headlines today and taking your views as we do it as well at K24 TV. One story that has dominated the news cycle front and center, of course, has been the relations between Nairobi and Mogadishu. The Kenya-Somalia relationship definitely not at its best point. In the Standard on page 5, stop provocations, Kenya tells Somalia. Uhuru chairs special session of the National Security Council to discuss breach of country's territorial integrity. That's a story they can find there. And of course, as we look at the timeline in terms of events and what has happened so far, clearly all is not well. From the recent past, we've had the Somali-Kenya maritime dispute that's supposed to be gotten to the end by this year, June. Last week, we had the Somali ambassador to the UN talking about how we were sending destabilizing forces in Somalia. That's an issue that has come up as well. Last weekend, we have 11 MPs going to Somalia to visit the president. They said they went and met the president for Majo, spoke about how they can actually stabilize this northeastern region. And now here we are with a special sitting of the National Security Council on this. It's a very dicey affair right now as we look at it. And for the fact that the president has even come out and given a terse statement as far as our neighbors are concerned, how do we read into this moving forward? What's the state of our relationship like? We also have Jubaland that's pretty contentious as well in that particular area. How do we solve this Horn of Africa problem with our neighbor, Dr.
I don't want to sound like I'm in the habit of criticizing anything and everything that is from the government. But the truth is, it is Kenya which has been actually provoking Somalia.
So you believe the statement that was made by the Somali ambassador is true?
Yes, Kenya has been provoking Somalia for far too long.
How do you say that? In what way?
What are our forces doing on Kenyan soil?
On Somali soil.
Yes. I mean, what are our forces doing on Somali soil? In total contravention of UN conventions. It is very clear that when you share a common border with a country, you cannot take your forces to that country for peacekeeping. Yes. That is the international standard. And Kenya, however well-intentioned we are, for as long as we remain neighbors of Somalia, we can't justify our presence there.
No wonder. The fight against terrorism, Al-Shabaab is in there, and that's the only way to
it is true, but we needed to ask other African countries to send their troops and not Kenyan troops. You can't blame the Somalis for thinking that we are now an occupation force. What is more, President Uhuru has been hosting political players, the principal political players of Somalia in this country. He would do very well to ask some of them who we choose to call warlords. He would do very well to ask those warlords to leave this country so that the leadership in Somalia is not always second guessing that are those warlords scheming in Kenya to come and overthrow us and so on and so forth. Finally, Kenyans know that President Uhuru, no, it was President Kibaki. It is Kibaki who started it. President Kibaki went even further. He even hosted a parliament of Somalia. Right. You remember? They used to have sittings at the hotel. At Laiko Hotel. So we have been provoking Somalia all through.
Some people might say this was being a friendly neighbor in terms of giving them a place where they can actually meet, have the parliamentary meetings, because things weren't all well in Somalia at the time.
A friendly neighbor indeed, given that our forces go there and they engage in contraband trade. They trade in cargo, they trade in contraband sugar, and other things. How do you expect Somalia to remain stable when our forces are doing that kind of thing?
Okay, as Dr. says that, Ben, what about the aspect in which our own MPs have been invited by the president of Somalia to that particular country and really don't know what has gone on so far? They say they want audience with the president because with our president because they have a goodwill message from President Farmajo that they are supposed to give.
Well,
what do you take of that?
I am not specifically privy to the protocol issues that may emanate from such a visit, and if indeed, because they had a chance to meet the Somali president, and if indeed they have a message to President Uhuru Kenyatta, I think it would be important for the president to find time to listen to them. I saw a lot of people bashing them out there, which I don't think is appropriate, because when you were even chairing the Public Accounts Committee way back in the National Assembly, I want to believe you had the opportunity to visit many countries, and you'd even have a chance to visit even heads of state or heads of government, and we should not really read too much on that. Again, you realize most of these members of parliament were drawn from the northeastern region, particularly Mandera, which is one of the worst affected areas by these clashes. And I was also reading an analysis of the clan challenges within the larger Somali community that is at the base of what we are witnessing. So I don't think there should be anything wrong with these leaders also going to petition, maybe even in a language that the Somali president would understand, and also present their perspective in terms of how it is impacting their communities back in Kenya. Because when you saw the videos of traumatized children and women and old men in Mandera after the Monday incident, you realize there is need for a lot of consultation. But I sincerely agree with Dr. here. It does not make sense to have insisted to maintain KDF troops in Somalia up to now. And it is evident that even the continued presence has not really either stopped or contained completely the threats of terrorism in this country. So there needs, you see, we have done this now for the last 9 years. We went to Somalia in 2011. It's 9 years down the line. So as they say, it is only a fool who insists on doing the same thing every day or every morning and expecting a different outcome. Right. By this time, perhaps you would have identified or deployed a different strategy. And as Dr. is putting it here, maybe we need a totally different independent unit to be able to spearhead either the fight against terrorism within Somalia itself, and also in the resolution of the disputes that we have continued to witness between Kenya. There are two aspects of it. One, of course, Kenya feels to be the bigger brother, and because we have hosted Somalia for a long time, especially since the refugee crisis of 1991. So we feel really entitled, and there has been a lot of elements of disrespect in terms of how we want to relate with Somali, yet they are our immediate neighbors. I think the idea should be, especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to change tact, because some of this dispute, you saw how they bungled the issue of the maritime dispute until it reached where it is now, a situation that could have easily been addressed. I think there are people who are not either guiding the president accordingly, or who are deliberately refusing to do what they are paid to do within the foreign service or the foreign affairs departments, to ensure that we have good neighborliness with our neighbors.
As we say that, there's a statement from State House spokesperson Kanza Dena. We therefore urge the federal government of Somalia to cease and desist from the unwanted provocations and focus on managing its internal affairs for the welfare of her people. When you talk about this particular statement, as you can see, the rhetoric is now heating up. It's going up a notch. What does this mean next? Because already our forces are in there as of now. Where do we go next diplomatically? How do we restore this particular neighborly relations? And even as we do this, we still have a dispute in the International Court of Justice for June. How do we sort this out?
What is making people unhappy, and especially the president, and justifiably so, is the fight that took place amongst the Somali warlords on Kenyan soil. If we are unhappy that fighting is taking place on our soil, what makes us think that the Somalis are happy when our forces actually engage in war on their soil?
Do you think that would be the solution?
So the solution is pull out the KDF and deploy them on the border. That will be the solution eventually in the long run. I don't want to overquote Donald Trump. Donald Trump is very clear. You are free as Latinos to do what you want to do, so long as you don't cross the border. And if you are in the habit of crossing, I'll build a wall.
Right.
Okay? You have to be clear for purposes of public order. Take, for example, the issue you have raised with Mulua about our MPs. It's laughable that anybody would think of punishing those 11 members of parliament
When you traveled as a member of parliament,
Yes.
did you follow those standing orders? Did you say where you were going and for how long,
Yes.
and that address they could get you at wherever you are?
Yes, I want to speak to that. In fact, the attempt to condemn those 11 members of parliament smacks of profiling of Kenyan Somalis. The truth is, there is no difference between a Kenyan Somali and a Somali Somali. Some of these members of parliament actually have blood relatives on the Somali side.
True.
Just like us lawyers,
Yes.
we have blood relatives on the Ugandan side, and they are lawyers.
Or the master is in Kenya and Tanzania.
And you remember Mutyambai,
Right.
former vice president? He was vice president in Kenya, and his brother was also vice president in Uganda. That is how unique border communities are. So to verify these MPs is to assume that they are not human beings. Number two, that weak law that they are referring to, that they should have informed in accordance with standing orders, the chief whip or the speaker, it is true. But what is the intention of that standing order? That standing order, the intention is not to prevent any member of parliament from traveling. You can very well travel. It cushions you as a member of parliament because the constitution says if you miss sittings without permission without the leave of the speaker, if you miss 8 consecutive sittings, you lose your seat. So that standing order is meant to remind you that even as you go, make sure that the speaker's office knows. And if the speaker is not available, so that you don't lose your seat. The third point I want to make is that there are some reckless Kenyans who have been contemplating charging these people, the 11 MPs, with treason.
Right.
With treason. How laughable. If people are looking for people to charge with treason, then the people who took oath for being president should first have been charged with treason.
What for?
Yeah?
What for?
The people who took an oath that they were president, they should be the ones to face treason charges, and not 11 members of parliament who, in fact, if I was the president, I would be looking at them as goodwill ambassadors. I would actually allow them to go and talk to their cousins who are in leadership in that country, and they'll come with a good message. But what is the big deal?
Even with the heightened state of relationships, do you feel that was a wise move on their end to go without having informed everybody? Even as you can see, because if they had gone to Uganda or Tanzania, they probably wouldn't have been scrutinized as has been with them going to Somalia. So with that in mind, shouldn't they have at least just made sure that somebody knows that we are going for this particular mission and we'll be back?
Jeff, so that I don't offend the intelligence of Kenyans, let me beg to be excused. I find it difficult, Mulwa, to imagine that those 11 MPs could have gone to Somalia to plan to overthrow the government of Kenya. I mean, it's unimaginable.
Right.
These are good guys, goodwill ambassadors. And it is not in doubt that these 11 members of parliament are actually Kenyans. They are not ordinary Kenyans. They are Kenyans who have a bigger stake in Kenya than the common miraa trader in Mandera and so on. These are legislators. We should encourage them, pay them as goodwill ambassadors. They be accommodated in Somalia. They be listened to. They'll hear things that the government doesn't normally hear because of diplo-speak. These ones will not be involved in diplo-speak. They'll call it a spade for a spade.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, it's an issue that we are still closely monitoring, of course, after that National Security Council meeting to see how we move forward in terms of the relationship between those two countries. Our last story before we wind things up can be found in the Daily Nation. This is on page 4, and it's a continuing, fissure and crack between the DPP and the DCI's office. From Monday, there's been, intimations that things are not well as far as that relationship is concerned. Yesterday, I had a panel here that said we're reading too much into this. These things happen. No. But when you come to page 4, and DCI boss Kinoti says, Haji has betrayed us, but we won't give up the fight. Clearly, there's a very big problem. Where did it start? Because remember when they came in, joint press conferences, joint raids, there's a lot of multi-sectoral work going on. We had Kamata Fridays. What went wrong?
I remember a story that we used to be told when we were young about the hare and the hyena. And one evening they had a consensus that they were supposed to go back home and kill their mothers and throw them into the river. So what happened is the hare went home, but picked a banana stamp, and they had agreed at a specific time they are going to throw their mothers into the river. So the hare took a banana stamp and threw it into the river, and the hyena actually killed his mother and threw him in the river. So after days, the hare continued growing fat and round because he was eating and being cooked for very good food, while the hyena was growing thin because now there was nobody to cook for him. And that analogy plays out because I have been consistent. Believe you me, it is important for this country to fight corruption. That is not negotiable. We are where we are as a country because of the issue of corruption. But again, there must be levels of transparency and honesty, and also genuineness in terms of how we want to fight corruption. We cannot start fighting corruption by compartmentalizing this country, where you look like you are a bit kieleweki so we can spare you, you look like really tanga, we must punish you. You know, that the war on corruption quickly picked that direction. And then they introduced the Kamata Fridays. I'm glad nowadays now they're doing it on Mondays. You saw Achesa on Monday and also Manduku on Monday. Maybe it is going to be better Kamata Mondays. But there has been a lot of dishonesty to a large extent. And I have no doubt in my mind that DCI Kinoti has been genuine and committed towards ensuring there is fairness. And that is why in terms of implementing or executing the investigations or arrests, it has been balanced. But when that information reaches the DPP's office, there is a huge problem. We have to agree. Those two institutions, EACC and DPP, there is a huge problem in the war against corruption. And I am glad that we have Kinoti, who is bold enough to speak, because previously perhaps there was a lot of undercover happenings that were not revealing these realities. And there has been also cases, or there has been a lot of push to ensure that the DCI is sufficiently equipped to be able to prosecute completely, because there is evidence. And it runs into so many cases, I don't want to list them here, where open cases of corruption or pilferage of public funds on those kinds of cases are investigated by the DCI, but no prosecution or shoddy prosecution is undertaken by the DPP. I don't know whether the DPP is still carrying from the era of when we had a former Attorney General who was famous for the nolle prosequi pronouncements, where if he likes Halwale, then your case is terminated and you can't find reprieve. In my view, Kenyans need to focus more on what Kinoti is talking about, because there is a problem. There has been select application in identifying and prosecuting cases of corruption. We have seen also cases whereby even the DPP, without sufficient evaluation of what is presented before them, they rush to court because they have small political scores to settle. My invitation would be to the DPP to remove themselves completely from the politics of this country. That office is independent. He had massive goodwill from Kenyans when they came into office, and as Kinoti is complaining, because eventually all of them will be blamed together. You know, Kenyans will not be bothered about who failed at what stage. Eventually, when the war on corruption collapses, all of them will take the blame. And I think it is important for Kenyans to pay attention to what DCI Kinoti is saying and focus in identifying where the problem is and kill this concept of select application of the war on corruption and genuinely combat corruption. Whether we are attending BBI rallies, whether we are attending Tanga rallies, let the war on corruption be completely independent of the politics of the day.
Dr. I'll come to you, because as Ben says that this could be due to selective prosecution as far as the DPP's office is concerned. There's another quote from DCI boss George Kinoti. He says, "My officers are now getting frustrated daily. They spend a lot of time investigating crime, risking their lives, and even after getting all the evidence required to prosecute cases, they are reduced to carrying files." True. Is this a supremacy battle between the two officers? And that's where the issue really is. Who's the bigger boss in this?
This is a very technical area, and I'll be reluctant to speak authoritatively. I would leave it to Molwa as a governance expert to do. But allow me to speak purely from my understanding of order. And the custodian of order in this country is the Constitution of Kenya. The Constitution of Kenya does not contemplate a situation where Kinoti directs what happens in court. Kinoti is not an officer of court. In fact, the farthest that he can ever go, Kinoti, is to go to court as a witness to defend the evidence that he has been gathering. Right. The line of thought Kinoti is taking appears to suggest that Kinoti wants to have a say on how prosecutions are done. The office of the DPP is equipped with the necessary competence in terms of human resource to decide when it is time to take a case to court. It is not good enough, Mulwa,
yes.
for a case to go before a judge just for purposes of drama. A case is taken to the judge because now the DPP is convinced that he'll be able to prosecute it and he is going to win. Kinoti should wait and for DPP to tell him, the investigations that you have brought me have sieved through. I think you should do further investigations on ABCD. That is what is expected of the DPP, right. To request the EACC, the DCI to clarify areas so as to solidify evidence to give him success when he goes to court. Having said those things, let me give advice to Kinoti. The first thing Kinoti needs to do is to go and read the Constitution and the law. The second thing he needs to do is, this morning, Kinoti, if he wants to succeed as a policeman, he must pull down his Twitter handle. Because Kinoti is in the habit. The moment he starts a case, he rushes to the Twitter handle. Oh, I'm looking for so-and-so. I have done ABCD. Why is he doing investigations through social media? It is not helping him at all. And there are many instances where Kinoti has evidently demonstrated selective investigations.
Right.
Take, for example,
yes.
Yeah, the case of Rashid Echesa. Yeah, I'm not in any way holding brief for anybody around Rashid Echesa, but they could have done better. When Rashid now has offended the people who go for at Capitol Hill for purposes of laundering, then they remember some of the things Rashid did yesterday, the other day, and even years ago. The issue of the motor vehicle, for example, is a matter that occurred between Rashid and a widow many years ago in Kisumu. And in the process of wanting to do something, they come with that excuse and they now focus on the other vehicles in Rashid's compound. I'm not saying that those vehicles are genuinely his. So he could do better. Similarly, the issue of Babu Awino. Yeah? How they have handled Babu Awino's case is amazing. Because Babu is speaking the language of the pro-BBI people. Babu is being treated by velvet clubs, so to speak, up to and including even being allowed, being invited to address Kenyans at a BBI rally. Surely, under Chapter 6 of the Constitution, a state officer is Sonko, is Babu a state officer? A public officer who has done what Babu had done should not be allowed to address Kenyans in a public forum. So this confusion needs to be sorted out. And then finally, for Kinoti's ears, and even by extension to Haji, they should stop using their offices as weapons of managing the politics of Kenya.
Absolutely.
They're trying to manage our politics using their offices. Let me tell you, I don't know whether we shall meet it. If you look at this headline in the People Daily, there is my good friend, very good friend, Honorable Elizabeth Zongoro. Elizabeth Zongoro was member of parliament over 10 years ago. Over 10 years ago. But when she was not singing the tune of the reggae leaders, the lady found herself in court. These people came and arrested her on matters that might have happened over 10 years ago when she was in charge of CDF. I want to congratulate my sister here, Ongoro, for also choosing to play to the tune of reggae, so that her matter is also laundered.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why you leave it as far as that is
A
concerned.
very quick one on that.
Seconds.
Yes, 10 seconds. In fact, there is a clear case already in the standard page 18 of the selective standards that the DPP is applying. There is a case of 2 Somali men, businessmen, who have illegally, fraudulently acquired land here at the Nairobi ICD. And the DPP went to court to stop the prosecution. The court refused to grant him that. There is a clear case that Governor Sonko has been singing about for the longest we can remember. As we speak, there is a mall under construction in South Sea by a Somali businessman on a land that was earmarked for an ECD center. That matter has never been. There are cases in the Auditor General's report of millions of shillings that have been squandered by northeastern governors, and in fact some of them have been invited to be witnesses instead of to be prosecuted. Those are cases that are clear in the public domain. So the DPP must invite himself to rise above small interests and small and narrow community focuses and really execute the job of that office as it is outlined in the Constitution.
Okay.
The concerns, I still stick to the reality that the concerns that the DCI Kinoti is raising are legitimate. It can be very frustrating. The DCI today is very equipped on matters of investigation. You'll be very surprised what this country is capable of.
We leave it at that, Ben.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. You have gotten the point as far as that's concerned.
Yes.
That's where we draw the curtains as far as our newspaper review is concerned this morning. Quite heated issues right there. You can also continue to have that conversation online at K24 TV. You can also SMS us on 21222. Thank you so much, Ben Mula, for making time this morning. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for making time as well. Have a great day. And of course, enjoy your weekend as we move forward. Take a break. We'll get back with Interactive.